Celebrating their first anniversary, a young couple entered the Vermont mountains for a camping trip. 3 days later, only one would make it back alive, setting off a desperate search for a missing person and the discovery of something so shocking it seems nearly unexplainable. Join us as we look into the horrific story of Emily and Joseph Ferlazzo. Before we begin, we would like to extend our deepest sympathies to the family and friends of Emily Ferlazzo, a young woman and nurse lost far too soon. It was Friday, October the 15th, when 43-year-old Joseph Ferlazzo and his 22-year-old wife Emily and their family dog Remington piled into their converted camper and headed out for an anniversary getaway. The pandemic was starting to fade, and the couple had spent most of the prior year living in the camper on her mother's property in Northfield, New Hampshire. It seemed like a good time to get out and enjoy themselves, and they'd be meeting up with Joseph's sister and boyfriend the next day. It was also a chance for them to get back to Vermont, the state they had left the previous year after the pandemic had made living together tough for the two. Joseph had been a licensed tattoo artist and body piercer, one of the many career choices that was hit hard by the changes brought about by the quarantine. Emily worked as a nurse, and while her husband's work faded away, hers had become one of the most vital frontline jobs, but one that carried some of the highest risks and burnout rates in the country. The two eventually left Vermont for an inexpensive place to stay and to ride out the storm until better days came back. The trip from Northfield, New Hampshire to Bolton, Vermont takes about 2.5 hours, winding through some breathtaking scenery. The leaf-looking season for Vermont is in the middle of October, drawing visitors from all over the lake region and the country to take a look at the beautiful splashes of color. The couple would be staying at a campsite just off of Vermont Route number 2 and the Bolton Valley Access Road. Nearby, there would be the Bolton Potholes, an area known for gorgeous cascades, waterfalls, and swimming holes. It was truly an autumn paradise, with temperatures comfortable in the 70s and clear skies. And then, the next morning, Joseph walked into Maxie's restaurant in nearby Waterbury Village to have breakfast with his sister and her boyfriend. Emily was not with him. An excuse must have been made for her absence. The trio had their meals and then parted ways. What probably just dawned on you didn't register with the people Joseph was dining with. Emily was not there. Whatever the excuse he gave was, it could not have been true. She couldn't have stayed back at the hotel because they weren't staying at one. Instead, they were staying in their camper. She couldn't have gone out for a drive on her own because Joseph had their only vehicle. Emily just was not there. On Monday, October the 18th, Joseph would call Emily's parents and let them know that he and she had had an argument. Just outside of Bolton, he said, the two had argued. He stopped the camper and she had gotten out and walked away down Vermont Route number 2, saying that she would call for an Uber to take her back to New Hampshire. Joseph said that he then drove back down the road to a convenience store, stopped there for a while, then he drove back hoping to pick her up. She was nowhere to be found, and he assumed that she had been able to get a ride. She was last seen, according to Joseph, wearing a black long-sleeved shirt, ripped jeans, and white sneakers. Emily's parents told him that she had never arrived. The family immediately called the police and reported her as missing. They knew the couple had a rocky relationship and that there had been some incidences where they saw bruises and scratches on their daughter. They had suspected there had been at least a few cases of domestic violence between the two of them. Perhaps the two were just incompatible. Perhaps it was the stress of the times with little income, or maybe even the cramped quarters of the two of them living in a tiny converted camper. The police had never gotten involved before, but now those incidents made the parents very suspicious of Joseph's story. The police would agree, and they needed to talk to Joseph. They couldn't reach him, though, as he never brought the camper back home to her parents' property. Joseph didn't come home. Instead, he headed down to the town of St. Albans, Vermont, about 60 miles away from their campsite in Bolton. He headed to a friend's home and stopped for a visit. That friend let him park the camper outside of his house on Meadowbrook Lane, not having any idea that Joseph was apparently keeping a horrible secret. That night, Joseph would stay in the camper. He wasn't sleeping, though. What he was actually doing was a gruesome end to his marriage with Emily. The next morning, Joseph would head to a nearby Maple Fields convenience store as if nothing had happened at all. Throughout the night, police both in New Hampshire and Vermont had been on the lookout for young, blonde-haired Emily, but to no avail. Joseph, with dark curly hair, numerous tattoos, and a nose piercing, had been spotted several times here and there. In particular, after seeing the missing persons report on the television news, one of the servers at Maxie's restaurant called in to say that he had eaten there on Saturday morning, but that Emily was not with him.
Vermont State Police are looking for a New Hampshire woman who disappeared from the town of Bolton. Officials say 22-year-old Emily Ferlazzo from Northfield was last seen Saturday afternoon. They say she and her husband were staying in an Airbnb. They say the couple had an argument and Ferlazzo went for a walk. Her husband says he went to the store and when he came back, he couldn't find her. Ferlazzo was last seen wearing a long-sleeved black shirt, ripped jeans, and white sneakers. She also has a sleeve tattoo on her left arm and a snake tattoo from her chest to her torso. If you have any information, you're asked to call Vermont State Police.
A friend of Joseph's in St. Albans had also called to say that he had run into the man on Monday evening, but that he did not know where Joseph had gone afterwards. The next morning, Vermont State Police Detective Sergeant Amy Nolan happened to walk into the same Maple Fields convenience store that Joseph had. It took a moment for her to make sure that he was the man they were looking for, and then she approached him. The situation certainly could have gone badly, but Sergeant Nolan calmly let Joseph know that he was wanted for questioning in the disappearance of Emily Ferlazzo. Joseph, knowing what had actually happened and perhaps resigned to whatever fate would bring next, surrendered to Sergeant Nolan and was taken back to the State Patrol barracks in St. Albans. Once in custody, Joseph began telling everything.
Let's start with breaking news tonight. A woman reported missing has been found dead, and her husband tells state police that he did it.
NBC5's Carolyn Sistran joins us live from the St. Albans Police Barracks. Carolyn, what are police saying?
Well, Brian, Alice, Joseph Ferlazzo was recognized at a Maple Fields convenience store earlier today by a state police detective, and that detective bringing him here to the St. Albans barracks just minutes away from that store where he eventually confessed to killing his 22-year-old wife.
The information he provided was that he killed his wife. He said that he had done so in the town of Bolton early Saturday morning hours.
Well, her body will be brought to the Chief Medical Examiner's office in Burlington for an autopsy tomorrow to determine the cause and manner of death and to confirm her identity. And Joseph Ferlazzo is still here in St. Albans, and police say that he is expected to be charged with first-degree murder by the end of the night, and his arraignment will be tomorrow in Burlington. We're live in St. Albans tonight. Carolyn Sistran, NBC5 News.
The camper van would turn out to be the grisly scene of a murder and a frantic attempt to dispose of her body. There were still many questions to be asked, but there was no doubt as to what had happened. Now it would just be a matter of untangling the evidence in light of what Joseph had said and would admit to. Forensic teams would work around the clock, piecing together not just how the murder had happened in the camper van, but the lives of the couple who had been living within it. Meanwhile, Joseph would lay out his version of what had happened. In his story, Joseph would tell police investigators that he and Emily had gotten into a heated argument on the way to Bolton. Pulling over, the argument became a fight, and it came to blows, with her kicking him in the groin. The pair calmed down and got back into the camper and continued on their journey. That evening, according to the account Joseph gave to the police, Emily went to lay down and was asleep in just a matter of minutes. Joseph then said that he took a pistol and shot her twice in the back of the head while she was sleeping, killing her almost instantly. The Vermont State Medical Examiner's autopsy would confirm that portion of his story, that a nearly point-blank gunshot had been the cause of Emily's death. Joseph then told investigators that he had put a black plastic trash bag over Emily's head and dragged her body from the bed and stuffed her into the cramped bathroom of the camper. There she would remain while he had breakfast with his sister. and there she would continue to remain the next day and the following day too, as he drove to St. Albans. After he secured permission to stay in the camper at his friend's place in St. Albans, Joseph had spent the night dismembering Emily's body. Using a handsaw, Joseph removed her hands, feet, arms, and legs, putting each of the parts in separate trash bags. When the camper was brought to the St. Albans Police Barracks lot, forensic teams entered the vehicle. All of the parts of Emily's body were found within the camper, along with the alleged weapon, a Glock 19 semi-automatic pistol. Other weapons, ammunition, and a sizable amount of cash were also found. There was no sign of Remington the dog. Whether he told the police what his plans were for Emily's body after that point has not been released to the public at the time of this video. Joseph, in a protective mask and face shield, would appear on closed-circuit television the next day for his arraignment in court. After charges and preliminary information were offered, it was ordered that Joseph be held without bond until the time of his trial. At the arraignment, even though he had confessed to the killing and provided details of what had happened to the officers the previous day, Joseph would enter a plea of not guilty. Over the next year and beyond, Joseph would remain in jail awaiting trial. During this time, he applied for a court-appointed attorney. Filings showed that in the previous year to the incident, he and Emily had only made about $4,000 in verifiable income. He also stated on the form that beyond about $3,500 in the couple's bank account, he had on hand about $10,000 in cash. Forensic personnel in searching the camper van, however, reported they found some $20,000 in cash in the vehicle. In addition, Joseph listed the camper van, 2016 Jeep, and a 2021 Ducati motorcycle in his possession, along with another unspecified motorcycle. Investigators would find that he had given both motorcycles to friends earlier to either hold on to or keep prior to the incident. Records would also show that he still roughly owed about $6,000 on the Ducati motorcycle. The camper and the cash on hand, being a big part of the evidence in trial, left him with an inability to pay the full amount that would be considered normal for a trial of this magnitude. He would be allowed to use a public defender, funded at least in part with his own limited resources. Emily's family and friends were left to cope with the loss as best they could. The Ferlazzo's dog, Remington, had been found apparently, and then dropped off at one of Joseph's friends' houses before the incident occurred. The dog now lives with Emily's mother and stepfather, Adrian and David Bass. The Bass family, devastated by the loss of their daughter, were able to receive some counseling from a special social work group that operates as part of the Vermont State Police Major Crimes Unit. They thanked the group, but said that the loss might never be something they could get over. In December of 2022, Adrian and David would win a civil case against Joseph Ferlazzo for the death of Emily. The family would be awarded a judgment of $1.5 million. While there was no way that Joseph would be able to pay that amount of money, the Basses would say the case and the judgment were done to make sure that in no way Joseph would ever be able to profit off the death of their daughter. Should he sell his story, any proceeds would go to her family rather than him. In August of 2023, Joseph's attorney would request additional forensic testing on the firearm allegedly used in the murder as part of his defense. It can be assumed that after the reporting of those results, Joseph's murder trial should follow along not too long after. Until then, his plea of not guilty will have to stand until the evidence and his own confession can be brought before a judge and jury. On a side note, this is not the first time the Ferlazzo family has encountered murder. In October of 2009, Joseph's stepmother, Young Hee Lin Ferlazzo, was found stabbed to death in her apartment. Joseph Ferlazzo Sr. had come home after a late-night grocery shopping trip and found her dead on the floor in their home in Upper Gwynedd Township in Pennsylvania. The father was questioned in the stabbing but was not considered a suspect. It is now considered a cold case by local police. Lynn Ferlazzo had been the manager of a massage parlor owned by her husband. The massage parlor had been raided sometime before, and a number of workers had been charged with prostitution, including the woman's niece. In the case of the younger Ferlazzo, we will have to wait to see if justice will be served in the death of Emily. If anything can be taken from this case, it is that domestic arguments and violence are serious issues. If you or someone you know is the victim of domestic violence, please seek help and do not allow yourself to become a victim of continued abuse or even worse. Check your local area for domestic violence survivor resources or call the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-7233. Or you can simply text the word START to 88788. There are people who care, and they will help you.
Simonette had it all figured out. She had her dream job, she was doing what she loved, and she volunteered at the local church along taking part in other activities that were aimed towards helping people. A school teacher with a constant smile on her face and a loving husband. Apparently, she had a dream life, but a mixture of escorts, money, and lies made her apparently perfect life crumble to pieces. Albuquerque, New Mexico, the city blessed with perfect weather, having a combination of blue skies and sunshine for at least 310 days out of the year. But there was another blessing that came for the Mapes family on September 25, 1982. Their daughter, Simonette, was born, and since her early years of life, she sported a bright smile on her face. Even though she was born there, by 1990 she had lived in many cities around the United States due to her father's job with the United States Air Force. The family would move every time the head of the family would receive a new assignment in a different city. The Mapes clan finally settled in New York. It was a pretty drastic change because they had just come from sunny Florida. Simonette had a normal childhood. She split her time between playing and studying, and even from an early age it was obvious that she was academically inclined. After graduating from Fort Hamilton High School, she decided to attend the College of Staten Island. Because she majored in education and completed her bachelor's degree, the next obvious step was to apply to be a part of the educational system. Thus, Simonette began teaching social studies in 2006. Some of the schools where she practiced her profession were in somewhat bad parts of Brooklyn, but she didn't mind. Furthermore, instead of being intimidated by the lifestyle and choices of some of her students, she decided to become more involved and help them. Simonette was the head of the Girls Leadership Club, teaching young women how to stand up for themselves and how to adopt a better attitude for the well-being of their own future. She also founded the Fairy Godmother Project, which provided prom dresses for students who were underprivileged. Aside from finding purpose by helping her students in any way she could, Mapes stumbled on something else, more specifically, love. She met a man at one of the schools where she taught. He was an English teacher. Simonette fell in love with Jonathan Krupe, and before they knew it, the two realized they were kindred spirits. In 2007, the two got married, vowing to love each other for the rest of their lives. The newlyweds found a condo on Forest Hill Road in New Springfield, Staten Island. They made it their love nest. After settling into their new home, she took a job teaching high school students at the School of Classics, an academy of thinkers, writers, and performers. She started her new job in 2009, and Jonathan also taught at the same school. Throughout the first years of their marriage, Mr. and Mrs. Krupe had an amazing time. She was a big fan of Disney, so they would go on vacation to Disney World in Orlando, Florida every year. The two would take thousands of pictures, and the smile she had on all of them said that she was having the time of her life. During the rest of the year, she taught and volunteered with the ASPCA and also had become a member of the Leukemia Foundation. The two also adopted a pair of dogs that she would frequently take on walks through the neighborhood. Life went on without any problems. It all seemed perfect, from the outside looking in at least. But in the summer of 2012, the couple hit a few speed bumps. Jonathan Krupe had been living a dual life. Both of them were supposed to graduate with their master's degrees at the same time. She received a list from the college with the names of the students who were about to receive their diplomas, but her husband's name was missing. She knew that something was going on, and she confronted him, wanting to know what was up. While looking in her eyes, Krupe said the strangest thing. He told Simonette that the school had difficulty spelling his name, and that was the reason that he wasn't on the list. She didn't quite believe him, but in her mind, Jonathan was innocent until proven guilty. But the doubts didn't stop there. One evening, Simonette looked through his phone's call log. She sensed that something else was going on. Upon scrolling through the list of numbers, she saw one that had been frequently called. She rang the number, and a woman named Miss Pumpkin answered. During their brief conversation, she wasn't able to find out anything, but she still had that sixth sense. She was convinced that her husband was unfaithful, even though she didn't have any concrete proof, at least not yet. Simonette later found out that Jonathan was diverting money from his account and directing it towards several escort services. This sparked an argument between the two. His diverting money that should have gone to pay for his master's degree was instead being spent on lust. July 5th, 2012 was a dark day. The breathless body of Simonette was found lying face down on the floor. The woman had 15 stab wounds in her back and neck. The murder weapon had perforated her lung, aorta, and jugular vein, but she did not die immediately, but rather she bled to death slowly. Apart from the fatal wounds, she had another on her ring finger, consistent with a defensive injury. She also had abrasions and bruises on her foot, arm, and shin, which were consistent with injuries one might sustain falling down a flight of stairs. This happened just 2 days shy of their 5th wedding anniversary. Jonathan was heartbroken. According to his statement, on that day, he got up at 6:45 a.m., well before his wife. He let her sleep in a little bit more, and at 7:30 a.m., he touched her shoulder, waking her up. Jonathan said that he needed to run some errands and he'd also take the car for an inspection. Simonette asked her husband if he would stop by and pick up some books and social plans from the school. She needed them to organize her next teaching session. Then she went back to sleep. Jonathan said he spent most of his time in Brooklyn on that day. He went to a discount theater, being in the mood for a show. And what better show to watch than Wicked? It played at a theater on Atlantic Avenue. After the show, he went straight to the school. Once in the building, he went straight to her office and picked up what she had asked of him. It was around 10:06 when he left the grounds. The next thing he claimed was that he texted his wife. He wanted to let her know that he had grabbed the books and plans and that he was off to get the car inspected, but he said she never texted him back. Upon finishing the inspection, he still had some errands to run. Krupe went to 5 different shoe stores saying he was in need of a pair, but after looking around, he didn't find anything he liked, so he didn't buy anything. It was 11:50 a.m. Simonette still had not texted him back, so he sent her another message, letting her know that he was going to Home Depot to pick up some paint. She didn't respond. He said around 12:15 he called her, thinking that the ringtone might wake her up, but without any result. Simonette did not answer. Krupe never made it inside Home Depot. He said he drove into the parking lot and changed his mind about the paint and went home. Upon entering the condo, he immediately called 911. Simonette's body was just lying there, and it seemed to be the result of a robbery that had gone off the rails. The police quickly came, and that's when Jonathan told them that it may be gang-related. but they didn't make the connection between the sweet teacher and a street gang that would want revenge. But Krupe told them about an event that had happened a few weeks prior. The two had survived a shootout, and that incident made his wife go on Facebook and write a post about how kids and teens from Staten Island shouldn't go around acting like Brooklyn gangsters because they have an easier way of life and have no idea what real thugs went through. Clearly, everyone thought the death was a gang-related retaliation. The loss of Simonette devastated her parents, Teresa and John Mapes.
I wanted you to know how much I love you, and that I never stopped thinking of the day that you were born. It was so beautiful, and I was so happy. The day you were 3 years old and you were so sick we were afraid we were going to lose you. The first day of school, and how you cried to come home. The day you graduated high school with honors and on the dean's list. And of course, that's my Simonette. The day you turned sweet 16. So beautiful. The day you came home and told me, Mom, I got a tattoo, please don't be mad. The day you came home and told me, I'm running away. We had to chase you all the way to Queens. The day you came home and told me, Mom, I'm going to college to become a teacher. That's exactly what I want to do. I want to teach these kids how to be better people. The day you came home and told me, I got my bachelor's, Mom. The day you came home and told me, Mom, I got a job with the New York City Department of Ed. The day you came home and told me, Mom, I got my master's. And I got it with honors. Well, that's the party we never got to have. Well, the day you told me when Dad was laying in bed, they thought that he had lung cancer. And you told me, Mom, don't worry, I will never leave you. And you're gonna come live with me, Mom. Never got to see that day. Thank God in a way, because Dad's still here, but you're not. I don't want anyone to feel sorry for me. It's a pain I have to live with. But this video's for you, Simonette. I love you so much.
They received a platform to speak out from the media, and her father asked for help, saying they needed to catch the killer who was running around the streets, possibly looking for his next victim. The grieving father, with tears in his eyes, closed his statement by saying that the murderer will pay, and he will not rest until they are caught and sent behind bars. A few days passed, and the funeral arrived. On July 10th, 2012, in Willowbrook, Simonette was laid to rest. It was a bleak affair, not only for her immediate family, but also her friends. They would refer to her as Sissy, a nickname only reserved for the people that knew her best. About 200 family members and friends attended the event. Among those friends, about a dozen leather-clad bikers, police officers in uniform, teachers and teens who may at one point have been her students, all gathered in a dignified tribute to Simonette Mapes Krupe, who was murdered at just 29 years old. Took place at Our Lady of Pity Church, where Simonette would actually volunteer when she had free time. Everyone was sad, keeping their eyes to the ground, thinking about the wonderful memories they had in the company of their deceased teacher. But there was one person that was acting kind of differently in comparison to others. It is true, everyone grieves in their own way, but Jonathan Krupe was sobbing and shaking uncontrollably. He clutched the rosary in one hand and kissed 2 roses before placing them on the casket. This behavior seemed odd, not because he was visibly in a world of pain, but because right after her death, her parents asked who would have done such a terrible thing, and Krupe replied saying they just needed to get over the incident and move on. The doubts that his sentiments were honest grew as time went on. Krupe, immediately after his wife's body was placed in the ground, started dating another woman, and she looked strikingly like Simonette. He even started to cut off any ties he had with her family, forbidding Teresa, her mother, from coming to pick up her late daughter's belongings. The series of events was upsetting, but the family was confident that the case would be solved. Fortunately, Jonathan Krupe's facade was no match for the police. They calculated that Simonette had been killed between 2 a.m. and 7:30 a.m., way earlier than 2:20 p.m. when the husband called 911. Krupe made it look like a home invasion before driving around town to various spots to build an alibi. He didn't have the stub from the movie he had seen to prove that he had attended. The truth was that Jonathan spent the afternoon with his favorite sex worker, known as Miss Pumpkin, the woman that Simonette called after she looked through his phone. When he said that she asked him to pick up her books, well, that was a lie as well. Staff members at the school clearly stated that he didn't need to do that at all because Simonette had all the necessary materials already at her home. He just needed reasons to get out of the house for a longer period of time. The couple was going through a very rough time, mainly because of his lies. Lying about getting his master's degree and lying about the family finances really took a toll on Simonette. She found out that her husband had spent over $50,000 on escort services and had dropped out of the master's program. She was heartbroken. It was like the entire marriage was crumbling around her. These fines made the tensions unbearable. Simonette threatened him with divorce and was close to talking to a lawyer about separating from her husband. Before killing his wife in cold blood, he went on his laptop. Jonathan searched for methods of cleaning up a crime scene and ways to use Clorox to get rid of any DNA traces. His search history led the police to take action. In November of 2012, Krupe was finally arrested after enough evidence was found. He was charged with second-degree murder and criminal weapons possession. The family felt vindicated by the arrest. It was a "I knew it" moment. Although everything pointed against him, Jonathan maintained his innocence. He never admitted to his actions and blamed everything on the home invasion story he had used from the beginning. His trial took place in the summer of 2015, and even though the prosecution did not have a murder weapon or any witnesses, they still possessed a strong circumstantial case. It was centered around his Google searches and the money he had blown on porn and sex workers. During the trial, Miss Pumpkin was called to testify. She and Jonathan had been meeting up since 2009. He told her that his name was Mike when they first got together. Krupe was browsing on adult websites, as he would often do, and stumbled across her phone number. One simple call was all it took for him to be hooked. After that call, they met in the same bedroom that he shared with his now deceased wife. During the course of 3 years, Krupe and the sex worker met up every 6 to 8 weeks. He would arrange different rooms at 3 motels he was very familiar with. The lawyer continued his questioning. He asked Miss Pumpkin if Simonette ever called her. The woman denied the allegation, even though it was true. She admitted that she was often called by angry wives who would find her number in their husbands' phones, but never by Simonette. Apparently, Jonathan had instructed her to lie. She did receive a call from him on the day he murdered his wife, around 11 a.m. for a quick session. They met at the Comfort Inn at 12:40 p.m. When he got undressed, she noted that she didn't see any bruises or marks on his body, nothing that would indicate an altercation or fight between him and his wife ever taking place. His lust didn't stop after he took Simonette's life. A month after she was murdered, he started calling on her again. They started having weekly 90-minute sessions in his parents' house, of course, without them knowing it. In one of the meetings, he asked her if she had heard about the murdered Brooklyn schoolteacher. When Miss Pumpkin said that she did, he admitted that the victim was his wife, and Jonathan got very emotional when speaking about his late spouse to the escort. He almost cried. The entire trial lasted about 5 weeks, and on July 20th, 2015, he was convicted of stabbing his wife to death. The jury reached their decision after just 2 hours.
A long time. Took a long time, but we finally got it. We knew after 3 days, maybe before. The first 3 days it was a shock to us. But after that we knew. Just didn't understand why he made his family go through this, made everybody go through this. He's a demon. This is our, our lives are still gonna be messed up. Always, it's a new normal. Something that we never forget. We think about this all day, every day. We don't cry all day, but we cry every day. You know what I mean? So we're sad because this was one of our. It was like a son to us. It's something we never seen or experienced. This silent forgiveness. It's uncomfortable. Just don't understand it. Very, very happy. Very, very happy. Thank God for that degree.
This has been long awaited. 3 years, and he got what he deserved by just open sentencing matches. And my baby can rest in peace.
They were convinced that the reason he killed her was that she had confronted him about the escorts and throwing the family's budget at them. Jonathan was surprised when he heard his sentence. He didn't expect to receive 25 years to life. He addressed the family in court saying he apologized, but it was not clear what for, because right after that, Jonathan continued to say that he did not kill his wife and that he was innocent. Krupe's attorney filed an appeal in 2019, arguing that the search warrants to look through his electronics were illegal. Of course, he lost that appeal. His earliest release date remained 2037. Jonathan Krupe quickly acclimated to life in prison. After just a few months of being incarcerated, he posted an ad on a prison pen pal service. He was looking for a new lady. He was sick of being single and was trying to find his soulmate. Jonathan said he didn't care about the race, height, weight, or religious beliefs of the girl that would steal his heart. He just wanted someone that is fun, intelligent, and knows how to stimulate him. In that ad, he repeatedly stated that he did not commit murder and he was only an innocent man who fell victim to a corrupt system. Upon taking notice of the ad, Teresa Mapes called the Clinton Correctional Facility. Simonette's mother was outraged that they let him write those words and possibly fool another girl. The woman demanded that the ad be taken down, considering it a slap in the face towards her family and towards everyone that had supported them and Simonette. As she was explaining her motives for the call, Teresa warned the officer who she was speaking to that Jonathan was a dangerous man. He was mentally unstable, saying only a person with deep psychological problems could do what he did. The officer thought that was referring to the murder, but Teresa remembered something that had happened while Simonette was still alive. Krupe had the 2 dogs with his wife, but she was the only one who cared for them. He actually broke their backs not once, but 2 times because they were misbehaving. Jonathan is still in prison to this day, paying for the horrible deeds that he did. After her death, and as an homage to her one and only daughter, Teresa Mapes created a Facebook group called R.I.P. Simonette Sissy Mapes. There she frequently posts messages that keeps Simonette's memory alive, as well as saying how much she misses her and how her life is not complete without her daughter. The group has over 1,000 members, most of which having a close connection to their devoted teacher.
This is a truly mysterious and strange story about a man who allegedly murdered his wife in cold blood. But the narratives he told the police were truly out of this world. Then, he disappeared for a number of years without anyone knowing where he is. The story starts with a woman named Gwen, who picked up her children at the bus stop on October 10th, 2012. As she was driving back to her house, she spotted the Chadwick children waiting at the bus stop. It was pretty odd because their parents were never late picking them up. The two boys and Gwen's kids were in the same prep school in Ojai, California. Since she knew the family, she decided to stop and see what was going on. It was out of character for QC and Peter to forget to pick up their two children. The boys were 9 and 12 years old, and they had an older brother who was 15, but studied at another school. The boy's mom, Hui Chu, or QC as her friends called her, was a stay-at-home mom. She was very meticulous with their schedule. They were her entire focus, and their father Peter would usually pick them up at the bus stop every single day. So, there was no reason as to why the boys would be there alone, waiting for the bus on their own. They all lived in a gated community that was part of a high-end neighborhood. Safety and security were a primary concern for the ones living in such a place. Gwen couldn't leave them there, and decided to take them home by herself. One of the boys tried to call his parents but couldn't get an answer. Little did the little ones know that what happened in their house would lead to an international manhunt. After they arrived, the woman who drove them home walked up to the Chadwick house and rang the doorbell. To her surprise, no one answered. Neither of the kids had keys to their house because they were never confronted with such a situation. Seeing that the house was empty, Gwen takes the boys back to her house, fixing everyone dinner. After they ate, the mom decided to try and contact some mutual friends to get a hold of the Chadwicks, but she didn't have any luck finding out where they were. So, the next step was to call the Newport Police Department. She requested them to do a wellness check on the family. The police arrived at around 7 p.m. They didn't get a response from either of their phones. Peter's phone went to voicemail, and his wife's phone kept ringing. They also tried to contact local hospitals to see if they'd maybe gone to the emergency room. There was no sign of them. So, by 7:45 p.m., they decided to get into the home. After they opened the door, all the lights were off. The wife was always meticulous, keeping the place spotless. After they entered, the police saw that in the kitchen, it looked like lunch was about to be made, but something interrupted the process. There were 2 plates on the kitchen island, and they were just left there. They noticed that the garage door was also open. The police officers then entered the couple's bedroom. Everything looked normal. Then they went into the bathroom. The police saw that the rug was crumpled next to the bathtub, so they walked closer. They noticed that one of the flower vases was on the edge of the bathtub, was knocked over, and pieces of glass were shattered all over the place. After that, they looked inside the tub, and they noticed some brown-looking smudge and some brown drops. The smudges were also on the wall. They took a closer look, realized it was most likely blood. This is what made them treat everything like a crime scene. The police were on high alert. You may think that they would realize that people sometimes break things and get cuts, but that would mean they went to the hospital. And upon checking every single hospital earlier, there were no signs of the Chadwicks. The police began combing the house for evidence, and then they questioned the neighbors, trying to find some information about the missing couple. Eventually, they placed both of them, Peter and QC, into the missing persons system. But the case wasn't over by a long shot. The police also noticed that the safe downstairs was open, and money and valuables seemed to be taken out of it. They also couldn't find QC's or her 2 sons' passports that would normally be in the safe. Things started to look more suspicious. Let's talk about the family a little bit. The children were very accomplished. A neighbor stated that the boys were known as being the best at everything they did. They had good grades, participated in school activities. Her mom was determined to give them the best opportunities possible by signing them up for different activities. But even though QC seemed to be very methodical, she also liked to party once in a while. One of the neighbors remembered how excited she would get for a Christmas party every year, about what she was going to wear and what to serve. She was described as someone who was warm, nice, and comfortable to be around. Peter, on the other hand, was very shy, didn't actually like socializing. People thought that he was hard to get to know, and he seemed to keep a distance from other people. From the outside, it seemed that the family was simply perfect, and that the couple were so in love and had it all together. The entire family traveled abroad a lot. They were wealthy, and both the parents had relatives that lived overseas. Peter was actually from Britain, and QC was from Malaysia. QC came from a large family, having 6 siblings. All of her siblings ended up with master's degrees, and she was the only one who just had a bachelor's degree. This made her feel a little bit insecure, and people think that's why she focused so hard on her children's education. She resonated with wanting them to do very well. Peter worked for his father's business that developed real estate, and he ended up managing an apartment complex that he owned. Not much was known about his family. Even though they had money, they weren't flashy. They drove a Toyota minivan and a 10-year-old Lexus SUV. The two had been married for 17 years, and it seemed that they were as in love as ever. Let's get back to the case. The police continued with their investigation that evening, and while looking around, they saw the minivan in the garage, but the Lexus SUV wasn't anywhere on the property. Because this was such a private gated community, there was surveillance footage. The police saw the car leaving the community at 1:32 p.m., and there was no footage of the car returning back to the neighborhood. They also found out that Peter's phone was actually turned off since 4:30 p.m. that same day. QC's phone was actually found inside the house connected to the charger. It was in the bathroom, next to the wedding ring and her wallet. They even had the helicopters flying around trying to locate the car, and they reported to the U.S. Border Patrol about the vehicle and the couple. Things took a weird turn. The San Diego PD get a 911 call the day after the two disappeared from their home. Keep in mind that San Diego is 100 miles away from the Chadwick residence. The call was traced to a gas station, 4 miles from the Mexican border. It was Peter who called, saying that his wife was dead and that someone took her.
Okay, so when she died at 11 o'clock, they took her?
Yeah. They maybe put her in the car.
What?
The body is here. I've been driving to the base. They say they're gonna cut her up.
What's her name? Are you on any kind of medication here?
Heavy.
Okay.
Not that.
Okay.
Because I think they're going
Okay, so this happened yesterday at 11. You're not calling us at 5:30.
He told the operator that a man broke into his house, took him and his wife to San Diego in their pickup truck, and then kicked him out of the car. The operator then asked if his wife is still in the truck he mentioned, but he kept repeating that she's dead. The operator asked how she died. The man started stuttering. He mentioned that they killed her a day before. Then he said that they've been driving ever since. During the entire conversation, the operator was very confused about what's going on. 2 police officers meet him at the gas station after this call, and he tells them his crazy story. He says that the day before at 11 p.m., Peter was working on one of his family properties. There was some remodeling going on, and suddenly a man named Juan approached Chadwick, asking if he had any work for him that he could potentially do. Peter said that he had a full crew and didn't need any help. but if he really is in need of a job, he informed him that he needed help on a small project at his house. At this point, Juan accepts, and he drives with the man back to his residence in Newport Beach and shows the worker a railing he needed to be fixed on the circular stairway inside the house. He leaves Juan to do the work while he went upstairs to his office. A little while later, he says that he hears his wife screaming. He went to check it out, following the noise into the bedroom, and then into the bathroom. Peter then says that he saw Juan holding his wife down by her neck and choking her, and apparently the woman was also under the water in the tub. Now tell us, if a strange man was in your house doing some work, would you take a bath without locking the door? This seems weird to us. Is Peter telling the truth? Peter allegedly tries to stop him. The man turned out to be too strong, and he threatened Chadwick with a pocket knife. Then, as Peter was telling the story, he skipped right to the part where the strange man murdered his wife, adding that the pocket knife's blade was pretty dull. Then, Peter Chadwick said that he was forced to wrap his wife's body in a blanket and put it in the back of his SUV. Juan also instructs him to get $10,000 in cash, along with jewelry and passports. Then the murderer gets in the Lexus SUV and tells his hostage to drive, all the while threatening him with the knife. Peter then continues to tell the officers that while he was driving, he continued to beg the man to let him bury his dead wife, but Juan continued to make him drive for hours without stopping. On the road, Juan gets on the phone with his friend, and because he was speaking Spanish, Peter doesn't understand a word of what he was saying. Eventually, Juan tells Peter to stop the car. Chadwick pulls over and the two wait for the murderer's friend to arrive. The name of the friend was Chi. Chi arrived in a green Chevrolet truck. They loaded the body in that truck, took the money and valuables, and left Peter there. But before they left, they instructed him to wait at the gas station until he receives a call from them on what to do next. That is, if he ever wanted to get his wife's body back. Peter waited just a few minutes and then entered the gas station, asking the attendant if he can use the phone to call 911. The police officers that arrived to meet him say that the man didn't even ask about the well-being of his sons. This seemed to be a red flag in their eyes. After Peter told them his story, they looked into his car, only to find a suitcase with men's clothes in it. And it seemed to be very messy, indicating the fact that when Peter packed it, he was in a hurry. Chadwick, after seeing that the officers found it, told them that the murderer asked him to pack a bag. Now, tell us, why would Juan ask his hostage to do so? Were they going on a vacation? After some further investigation, 5 hours later, they arrested Peter. They arrived at the station, and they take the typical mugshots of Chadwick. While doing so, they noticed that the man had several scratches on his body and on his neck. They found these wounds to be inconsistent with the story that he told. They didn't look like the wounds an attacker would inflict. In fact, they looked like defense wounds made by a victim. At the station, Chadwick mentioned that the scratches were made by Juan's pocket knife, but it was clear the man was lying. Another lie was that Juan sat on his chest for 5 minutes, thus immobilizing him, and making it impossible for Peter to administer CPR to his wife after she'd been strangled. During the interrogation, the police officers found it odd that Chadwick took so many long pauses before answering, and the fact that he would frequently cover part of his face with his hands made them believe even more that he was lying about everything he was saying to them. At this point, no one ever saw Peter in the company of another person. Not at the gas station, not at the job site, not at his house. It would come across as weird, because the man clearly stated he was in the company of someone named Juan, but Peter had something to say about that. He told the police officers that Juan was always in the back seat, and that's why he wasn't seen. Things weren't quite certain as to what happened, but the police had one very intriguing lead that they needed to follow. Peter did run into a police officer that very day when everything happened. This run-in took place as he was returning to his house, presumably with Juan to fix his stairs. Peter said that he pulled over to call his wife about lunch. Then a police officer came to his car to tell him he can't park in that spot on the highway. So, the detectives needed to track down this officer that saw Peter. Fortunately, after many calls, they managed to get in contact with the patrol officer that was on highway duty that day. They talked to him, and the man said that after looking around the car, he didn't see the driver with anyone else, meaning that Peter was all alone when he said he was driving home with Juan in the back seat. After a week of investigation, the officers still didn't know where QC was, even though they had a ton of information that would point to Peter being responsible for her disappearance. They started searching some suburbs of San Diego. They didn't have any luck in finding her. A detective and some deputies meet up in an area where some large plots of underdeveloped land were. They all split up and started to look around. One deputy went in a different direction than the rest, and he reaches the property. It was a house surrounded by a big iron gate, and right next to the gate, a large dumpster was placed. He gets closer and starts noticing a really bad smell. The man was very uneasy, but he opens the lid and starts pulling away some of the debris in the trash before something caught his eye. It was a green blanket with something wrapped inside of it. After putting it aside, the man was shocked by the sight which unfolded in front of his eyes. QC's body was finally found, wrapped in a blanket, hidden in a dumpster basically in the middle of nowhere. But one of the officers remembered something. This wasn't the only body that was found in that dumpster. The strange thing was that a year before they had found another one there. Also, another fact, the owners of the house were cleared away from any connection with the first body found in their dumpster. That incident shook them terribly, and the family moved out of their house for some time. The strange coincidence is that they've just moved back into the house, just as QC's body was found in the same dumpster. But the coincidences don't stop here. Normally, the trash would come every Thursday and empty the dumpster. Peter may or may not have known that, but he hid the body on a Wednesday. So the next day, the company should have emptied the trash, and QC's body might never have been found. It seems like the family who lived there was in some sort of feud with the trash company, and that's why they never came to pick it up. So to sum up, the only reason the poor woman's body was found was because the family didn't pay their bills and were not on good terms with the garbage disposal company. A totally unrelated thing made it possible for the police officers to locate QC's corpse. After they found her, the investigators started taking a closer look at what type of relationship did the two have, and that's when things began to unfold. Police started looking for QC's stuff in her house, and they found a note. It said from Pete's computer, and below that it had a list describing Pete's search history. It seemed that Chadwick looked up some disturbing and strange things. He searched for the cost of abortion in California, Chinese massage girl escort girl's divorce, and one that stood out, how to torture. Obviously, this information is very concerning. Then the police found out from the couple's friends that the mention of divorce came up within the marriage. And this was because QC said that her husband didn't give her attention at all. There were rumors that he was cheating on his wife. Their friends were asked why QC didn't leave her husband after finding what he had searched for on his computer. But she was apparently too concerned about her children's life and well-being to stop and think about her unhappiness. So, while being in custody, the judge sets a $1 million bail. Of course, Chadwick, being very wealthy, pays it off and is released. The trial goes on for 2 years. The man makes his appearance on hearings, is cooperative. He visits his children, who at that time lived with some relatives, and it seemed that nothing stuck to him. He eventually got the Lexus SUV back from the police, after they searched every last bit of it. Peter goes to Santa Barbara and stays with his father for a while, and the only thing he does outside the house is to drive to Orange County for his court hearings. But something suddenly happens on January 16, 2015. Peter doesn't show up to court, and this specific court hearing was to decide on what the jury will base their decision on during the trial. After seeing that the man was absent, the police stated that if he missed the second court hearing, they'll issue a $250,000 warrant for his arrest. His family and lawyer had no idea where he was, so they decided to worry, thinking that he took his own life. The police started to try and find out where Peter was, and upon looking at his bank accounts to see any traces of where he might have spent his money, they noticed that they've all been drained. At that point, Peter took out all of his assets, leaving even his children with no money, not even their trust funds. The investigators took another look inside Chadwick's home, and they found some interesting books. They were on the subject of changing their identity and living off the grid, and that pretty much solidified their idea about what the man was planning to do. They actually found out that before he disappeared, he started to take test trips to try and push the limits of his court order without getting into trouble. At that time, he was not allowed to leave the state of California, but obviously it didn't stop him. Supposedly, he traveled to Seattle, Missouri, and Pennsylvania, and he was never caught. This proved that he was not monitored well at all. The police found out from a cab company that someone took a taxi from Peter's dad's house all the way to an airport in Santa Barbara. The odd thing was that the taxi driver said the person was a woman, which led everyone to believe that it wasn't Peter. But after that, they got a hold of security footage from the airport, and Peter was spotted there. This made them believe that the man dressed up as a woman so that he wouldn't be recognized until he got to his destination. In the footage, he's seen waiting in the airport for hours without doing anything else. Then after he was done just sitting around, he gets up and leaves the airport, never to be seen again. At that moment, Peter was gone, but the police still went on with the investigation. After about 5 years, police get a very important lead. They found him in Mexico. In August of 2019, he was transported back to the United States. The police accredit this to having a close relationship with the Mexican authorities. You may wonder what Peter was doing during this time. Well, Chadwick, having millions of dollars, was living the good life in Mexico. He was staying in 5-star hotels and blowing all his money away on having a good time. but a law was suddenly given in the country. Mexican authorities required all the people who stayed in high-end hotels and weren't from Mexico to have a passport in order to check in. Peter, of course, couldn't do that because there was a warrant on his head, so he decided to stay in lesser accommodations, hostels, motels, and so on. He even began picking up odd jobs, maybe because he didn't want to lose all his money and needed some sort of income coming in. It seemed that Peter started even using different names like Paul Cook and John Franklin. Upon being returned to the States and placed under arrest, Chadwick is still going through trials. If found guilty of murdering his wife, he could face between 25 years and life in prison. Now tell us, what do you think? Did the man really kill her? And was really a Juan character involved? Leave your comments down below. We'd be very interested in your take on the entire case.
I put everything into this relationship. I have done nothing to your mom. I've never hit her. I've never hurt her. I've never called her names. A couple of times when I got really mad, I would say a bad word or something, but I've done everything I can. I haven't done anything wrong. I'm like, why me? I'm so sorry.
What you've just seen is part of a video posted to YouTube by 48-year-old Trent Pascal on October 21st, 2020, moments before he murdered his wife, 30-year-old Savannah Pascal. Trent had spent years gushing about his wife's beauty on social media, but this particular video had an altogether different tone and message. Amidst apologies to his daughter, Trent explained to anybody and nobody that he had been a good husband, but one who had been played for a fool. If there was anyone who should be blamed for the horror he was about to unleash, it was his wife, Savannah. She had, after all, brought it upon herself. Before we get started, we would like to send our deepest sympathies to the loved ones of Savannah Pascal, who fell victim to the abominable acts described in this case. A stone's throw away from the city of Houston, Texas, is a small town called La Marque, located on the edge of Galveston Bay on the Gulf of Mexico. The La Marque City Council will tell you that life here is good. Residents can enjoy easy breezy coastal living with a relaxed lifestyle and plenty of fishing and coastal walks, and only the occasional home invasion or other petty crime, courtesy of the city's unusually high crime rate. But the crime that occurred on Hawksview Drive in October of 2020 and the year-long events that would follow it would make home robberies and other crimes in La Marque pale in comparison. On the morning of October 21st, 2020, Donald Riddick heard the sounds of a heated argument coming from a spacious brick house located across the street from his. The home was at 400 Hawksview Drive and was that of 30-year-old Savannah and 48-year-old Trent Pascal, as well as their two children, William, aged 11, and Mackenzie, 7. Riddick had known the family for years. Their children were similar in age and had often played together on the street. While the voices coming from the house were quite clearly those of Savannah and Trent, it struck Riddick as unusual. He had never heard the couple argue before, let alone loud enough for passers-by to hear. Soon afterwards, Trent stormed out of the house and drove away in his pickup truck. Savannah followed shortly afterwards, heading to the home of a neighbor before returning back to the house. She would return at midday, this time with her mother. But by then, no one in the neighborhood was watching the house, and no one had any idea of the horrors that were about to unfold there. Savannah Kinchin Pascal had moved to the house several years earlier with her husband Trent Pascal. Born in Pasadena, Texas in 1990, growing up, Savannah had been a talented gymnast, dancer, and ice skater, and also an enthusiastic horseback rider. Her love of animals had led her to consider a career as a veterinarian. After graduating high school, she had taken up volunteer work at a vet clinic. But observing close up the suffering of the wounded or dying animals had caused a change of heart in Savannah. She decided instead to pursue a culinary career. She had scarcely started down her new career path when her life had taken an unexpected turn. Savannah was pregnant. And when the relationship with the child's father broke down, she found herself a single mom at the age of 19. For years, Savannah embraced the role of being a single mom to baby William. Later, she would find herself a lucrative new career goal, that of a funeral director. Savannah had the right temperament for working with the bereaved, a gentle touch and a natural tact. She knew just what to say and had no issues working with the dead. Life was heading in the right direction for Savannah, it seemed, and even more so when she met then 40-year-old Trent Paschal. Savannah was just 22, but Trent had his own successful contracting business and, with 18 years of extra life experience, had a comforting wisdom and a take-charge confidence that felt reassuring to Savannah. He was also smitten with the young woman, making her feel appreciated in a way that no one else ever had. There were a few small things that troubled her, his temper, for instance, and his jealousy. Occasionally, his confidence veered into arrogance, and his protectiveness felt a little like dominance. But despite her reservations, the couple married after just several months of dating, and by a year later, baby Mackenzie was born. Looking at their Facebook profiles, theirs looked like a very happy marriage. Both profiles are full of images of them as a couple, with captions such as, "I have such a beautiful wife." One picture contains the words "forever and always," and "Thanks, babe, I love you so much." In 2018, Trent wrote, "Well, I'm happy Savannah still has the curves since she lost all the weight. Love you, Savannah." The reality, though, was very different, much more like the playbook of a toxic and abusive relationship. From the earliest days of their relationship, Trent had begun to restrict the people that Savannah saw. At first by questioning their characters, then by outright belittling her poor judgment in friends. A night out would be followed by sulking and intimations that she wasn't a good mother. Money became his domain and another form of control. Savannah was putting in long hours working at the mortuary while studying to become a funeral director. Every penny she earned was handed over to Trent. He didn't trust banks, so he kept the money in cash at their home. Savannah was given an allowance. He decided the amount and doled it out accordingly. Even with absolute control over her money and free time, however, Trent was still plagued by feelings of insecurity. He became convinced that his younger wife would someday leave him for another man. He took to texting multiple times an hour, asking her to prove her locations. He criticized her for wearing makeup and accused her of deliberately dressing to attract male attention. If she spoke to another man, he accused her of flirting and would show up at her workplace unannounced. Once, he discovered photos she had kept from her prom with an old boyfriend and had her tear them up. A predictable pattern of explosive fights followed by heartfelt reconciliations began. Trent had a frightening temper. During fights, Savannah would often retreat until he'd calmed down. Afterwards, he would apologize with flowers and gifts and passionately proclaim his love for her. During particularly bad fights, Savannah would call her mom Shirley for support. Trent took to restraining her from doing this. Later, knowing she would have told her mom what had happened, he'd phone Shirley to give his own version of the story. Savannah's parents watched the relationship with grim alarm. It had been obvious to them from the earliest days of their relationship that Trent had an unhealthy need to control and dominate. They had advised her to leave him. Savannah had agreed, but had fallen deeper into the relationship the longer it went on. Their fights were terrible, she admitted, but when things were good, they were amazing. That cycle, as is often the case, was only ever going to end badly. Only just how badly, no one could have imagined in their worst nightmares. And Trent was on the brink of losing control.
By the autumn of 2020, the pandemic had disrupted Trent's contracting business to the point where his once multi-million-dollar company was earning less money for the family than his wife's job at a funeral parlor. The loss of status for Trent was intolerable, and his obsessive ruminations and creeping sense of losing control over Savannah reached new heights. Ironically, Savannah was slipping away. By October 2020, with Trent in control of almost every aspect of her life, Savannah had decided that she wanted out. It had been an awakening regarding domestic violence and her own status as a victim of it. Savannah had been helping raise money for victims of domestic violence. Her most recent post on Facebook from October of 2020 was a fundraiser for a domestic violence shelter. At work, we are partnering with the Bay Area Turning Point to collect items for women and children escaping domestic violence. We are a drop-off location, or you can bring them to me and I'll take them to work. Now until October 25th, she wrote. Savannah was emotionally and psychologically well on her way out of the marriage. For Trent, with his limited understanding of human nature, he simply ramped up his efforts to control Savannah and installed an app on her phone that enabled him to listen to her phone calls. One evening, shortly after he'd begun listening to her calls, Savannah phoned her parents to tell them that she intended to divorce him. They warned her not to confront him, but to simply leave while he was out of the house. She insisted on having an honest and frank conversation with him. After all, she said, she owed him that much. On the morning of October 21st, Savannah broke the news to Trent that she didn't want to live with him anymore. Their conversation rapidly deteriorated into a shouting match. Trent left the house and, distraught, Savannah went to a neighbor's before returning to get her car and head to her mother's. Trent had returned to the house not long afterwards. He had made his decision and had one final task to take care of before moving ahead with his plan. He needed to record a message and post it publicly, a message that would sully his wife's reputation and hopefully salvage his own after what he was about to do. Most of the 4.5-minute long ramble that was later posted to YouTube is addressed to the daughter he shared with Savannah. He might have posted it privately to her, but instead he chose YouTube. His real audience was the general public. The key takeaway was that there was only one victim here, and it was not Savannah, but him, Trent Pascal.
I didn't choose this. Your mom chose this. She's been cheating on me for a long time. I have audio of her talking to other guys. I didn't do nothing wrong to her. When we first got together, I told her, "You're too young for me." There's an 18-year-old difference in her age, and I knew she was kind of too young. She's been playing me for full. I told her not to mess with me, not to mess with my emotions. Don't play with me. I got an audio where she was calling a guy yesterday on her way to get her eyelashes done, and she said, "Hey, baby," and he goes, "Baby," and I was like, "That's not my voice. Why is she calling somebody else baby?" Then she started talking about a dream and everything, and she had with him too about sex and everything. And I put everything into this relationship. I have done nothing to your mom. I've never hit her. I've never hurt her. I've never called her names. A couple of times when I got really mad, I would say a bad word or something, but I've done everything I can. I haven't done anything wrong. I'm like, why me? My hair's a mess. I look horrible. Oh, sorry. Take these off.
When Savannah and her mother pulled up at the house several hours later, they had no idea that Trent was still filming his pre-murder confession. He would see them via the home's security cameras. And when they were just steps away from the front door, he abruptly stopped filming. He then fumbles with the phone before scurrying out of the room in order to wait in ambush in the bathroom shower cubicle.
deserve a good life. And I don't know what else to say. I'm so sorry I don't have better words right now. I'm hurting so bad. I provided what I could. I've done what I could for her. I've done nothing good for her. And I've treated y'all good. Done good things for y'all. And I just... I don't know what else to say. I love you, Mackenzie. I love you so much. Do something good with your life. Make me proud. Make me very proud. And Mom, I love you. You've been the angel through my whole life, taking care of me. Anyways, Mom, I love you so much. You're my angel. I love you. You mean everything to me. And Dad, you've done a lot for me too. And you've taken care of me. You raised me good. You've done whatever you could. Thank you. I appreciate that. I love you so much. You love me like your own.
Shortly after Savannah and Shirley entered the house, Shirley excused herself to go to the bathroom, choosing the suite off the master bedroom. Like a reverse scene from Psycho, no sooner had she closed the door than Trent emerged from behind the shower curtain, pointing a shotgun at her. Trent spoke just a few chilling words before unleashing his wrath. "I'm going to kill both you and then Savannah," he said. And then he opened fire. His opening shots missed Shirley, blew a hole in the tile wall instead. Shirley fled from the room, slamming the bathroom door behind her before managing to get out the front door, tripping several times in her efforts to reach safety. She'd nearly covered the stretch of lawn leading to a neighbor's house when she heard the harrowing gunshots reverberating through the streets. While the neighbors phoned police, Shirley watched Trent emerge from the front door, his mobile pressed to his ear. The neighbor captured him on his phone. He had just proven to Savannah who ultimately held the power, and he wanted to share the news with someone. He had called Savannah's aunt to tell her that he had just murdered her niece. He then got into his Chevrolet Colorado pickup truck and drove away. Stricken with dread, Shirley now re-entered the home. On the living room floor, she found her dying daughter, bleeding profusely from gunshot wounds to her abdomen. An ambulance would transport her to the hospital, where she would later be pronounced dead. Trent Pascal's truck was spotted by police in Houston, north of the home in Lamarck, 45 minutes later, where he was pulled over and surrounded. But Trent had no intentions of relinquishing control or being forced to face someone else pulling the strings. Why change the habit of a lifetime? As he stepped out of the truck, he pulled a gun from his waistband. Officers issued him warnings, which he responded to by pointing the weapon directly at them. Trent was shot in the arm, leg, and torso before being detained and cuffed. He was transported to a nearby hospital in critical but stable condition.
Investigators say the man shot was on the run, accused of killing his estranged wife. The murder investigation began earlier today in Lamarck. The deputy-involved shooting happened tonight in the parking lot of a Walmart off the North Freeway and West Road, just south of the North Belt.
There is still a heavy law enforcement presence out here right now. Excuse me, and you can see it right behind me. Most of their focus has been back on that side of the parking lot. You can see a car and a truck back there. A lot of deputies looking over there as part of their investigation. As you were mentioning before, Harris County deputies were looking for a murder suspect out of Lamarck, and they ended up here at this Walmart after getting information that that person might be here. Now, when deputies spotted him in a different car, they then pursued that vehicle as it was heading back to what they believed was the suspect's car. They had ordered the suspect to get out. They said he had a gun, ordered him to drop the gun, but he didn't do so, and that's when he was shot by a deputy out here, shot several times and taken to the hospital. He's in, last check, critical but stable condition.
Here's where things get even more messed up. 6 weeks later, having been lawfully and dutifully returned back to health, Trent was released from the hospital and taken into custody at the Harris County Jail for the murder of his wife. But Trent was charged with felony murder, which made him eligible for bail. In the state of Texas, anyone other than those charged with capital murder are deemed eligible for bail. Trent's bail was set at $450,000, and he was bailed out that very night by family members. Just weeks after murdering his wife, Trent was back enjoying his life on the streets of Lamarck. He did have several conditions attached to his bond. He had to wear an ankle monitor at all times, and to not leave the county, and to stay at his mother's home from 6 a.m. until 6 p.m., and limit his movements to the store and his lawyer's office. Soon after being released, he violated the terms of his agreement by missing a court appearance. Shortly afterwards, he violated the terms a second time with a traffic infraction. On a third occasion, he was caught with different vehicle license plates on his car and had 3 more in the back seat. On all 3 occasions, his bond was not revoked, and he remained a free man. He even became so blasé that he posted images of himself on weekend getaways at Galveston Bay to his social media accounts. It was the 4th violation that prompted court officials to finally revoke his bond, but by then, it would be too late. On April 13, 2021, a small car dealership in Houston reported that one of their vehicles had been stolen at knife point. A salesman had been accompanying a man on a test drive in a black Chevy Tahoe when the man pulled over at a gas station, withdrew a knife, and ordered the salesman out of the vehicle. He then drove off in the SUV. The dealership owner hadn't taken a copy of the man's ID before allowing him to test drive the vehicle, and was unable to provide police with any identity when reporting the threat. He did, however, post stills on his company's social media account of the man captured on their CCTV footage. In the comments, several people commented that the man looked uncannily like Trent Pascal, the man who had slaughtered his wife the previous October and whose face had been splashed all over the news. It was only when Trent missed another court appearance, however, that officers dropped by the house to arrest him that the shocking truth was revealed. There, on the floor, not attached to any human being, let alone Trent, was an empty, semi-destroyed ankle monitor. Trent and his stolen SUV were long gone.
This week marks 8 months since a 30-year-old mother of 2 was killed in her Lamarck home. U.S. Marshals say Savannah Pascal was shot by her husband, Trent. After a standoff with deputies, he was shot but survived and arrested, later bonding out of jail.
We don't feel that he should have been let out on bond again and again and again.
It's been a heartbreaking and frustrating 8 months for Savannah's family, made even worse after Pascal skipped bond back in April.
He has been in custody 3 separate times in the first 6 months after our daughter was killed. We warned them time and time again, don't let him back out.
You don't just vanish off the face of the earth.
Officer Chase Hunt with the U.S. Marshals Service is leading the manhunt.
The guy stands out. He's very arrogant and cocky. He's going to be out there. He's, in my opinion, a womanizer.
Officer Hunt says Pascal was last seen leaving his mother's house riding a scooter, not driving the SUV he's accused of stealing at knife point from a car dealership. Hunt thinks he's close.
My guess would be a hotel, shacked up with somebody that just hasn't seen the news.
Right now, there are no new leads.
We're on a constant state of alert. We never let the children out of our sight. We don't know what to expect, when to expect it, or where to expect it.
Pascal's bond has been revoked, and Hunt says his mother is now the victim there.
Trent, if you're out there and you're listening, you're letting your mom lose her house. And your stepdad, they took care of you their whole life, and you're going to let them lose their house, you're going to let them lose everything because you don't want to be a man and turn yourself in.
After a lengthy 9-month-long investigation and manhunt, police received a tip that Trent Pascal was sleeping in a van at an RV park in Florida. Police located Trent in the RV park in a stolen van on New Year's Eve 2021. As they surrounded the vehicle, a single gunshot rang out. In control until the end, at any cost, Trent Pascal had shot himself, denying Savannah's parents the opportunity to confront their daughter's killer or to see justice served. Shirley Kinchin later made a long and heartfelt statement to the press. She wanted to see her 48-year-old son-in-law stand trial. She wanted bond reform for Savannah and every other victim out there.
Did I want him to be held responsible for his actions? Did I want to look him in the eye and for him to face me again for what he had done? Yes. He is no longer a threat to my family or society. And as Evans said, we don't know who he victimized, how many he victimized. We will continue to honor our daughter's memory by fighting for bond reform and bringing light to a justice system that not only failed us and her children, but so many other victims. And there are many victims. We waited a little over a year. Many people wait decades.